Think about it. Think about it. Think about it.
Welcome back to High School Basketball Weekly. Tim Murray alongside of Rick Bua. And Rick, the regular season has drawn to a close in a big, big way, and we're on to Western Mass Tournament and State Tournament coming up following that. And we're going to get right into it as we had a great final week of action here in Berkshire County high school basketball, and we'll get going with the girls' side of things, Rick. And two teams that are not in tournament play, but have finished off their seasons in pretty good fashion. First, we'll start with McCann Tech. They finished out their regular season this past week.
Well, it's a good way to end the season, and good for them because I really like those kids down there, and I like Coach Kathy Boudet and her program down at McCann. And it's always a lot of fun when we're down there covering the Lady Hornets, and we cover them as close as we do any of the other three local Northern Berkshire schools. And for them to finish as strong as they did, they sat with one win, maybe two wins for the longest time, Tim, and then really started to gel towards the end of the season. It wasn't enough to get them into the postseason, but nevertheless, they lost to East Hampton in their last regular season game, 44-36, and East Hampton and Pope Francis were at the top of their league and had extremely impressive seasons this year. Yet the Lady Hornets stuck with them all four of those games, the two against Pope Francis and both games against East Hampton. When we do our closeout show, I'd like to probably do a little bit of work, Tim, that you and I were talking about off camera, on how many games the Lady Hornets lost by single digits. They were in so many of those ball games and just either couldn't finish for whatever reason. But Hannah Boisver finally had a really breakout game. We were waiting for Hannah to break out, and she had 18 points in that game. Macy Tatro, her counterpart, had 11 points, and that's pretty much what we were looking for all season long. It didn't happen, but the kids are just kids, and they're going to have off shooting nights, and that's what happened to the Hornets. Their shooting percentage was down this year, according to their coach. Then they lost to Hampshire, 41-34. There you go again, another single-digit game. Macy Tatro led the way with 17. But they went to Westfield. Now, this isn't Westfield Tech. This is Westfield High School. And even though the girls at Westfield are having a little down season this year themselves, they came back last night. The Lady Hornets came back, and they won that game at Westfield, 35-31, low scoring. Macy Tatro had 13, and Eddie Heyer, their point guard, had 11. And Heyer hit two big threes and scored 8 of her 11 points in the fourth quarter to propel that victory. So that's a great way to end the season. If you're going to, most schools, Tim, to go to postseason end with a loss unless you win the whole thing.
Right.
If you're not in the tournament, you always have a chance to finish your season with a win, and they did, and good for them. I just love that program down at McCann.
Rick, another team that finished strong, didn't qualify for postseason play, but had a great finishing run here in the season, Mount Greylock. And just to comment quickly, Rick, we've watched them this year. They've got a great foundation. I know Coach Jacoby's got to be really, really looking forward to next year as his teams really come around, and he's got really the nucleus of a fine squad returning.
Yeah, as always, all schools have seniors, and you're going to miss those kids an awful lot. They had scoring, they added so much leadership to the program. But when you have someone like Charlotte Cootie, the incredible sophomore, I call her a center, but she's a very, very talented young lady. She's a great basketball player. And what Coach Jacoby will do is he'll build his squad around her for the next couple of years. So the future is bright at Mount Greylock. On senior night, they defeated Southwick over in Williamstown, 56-48. Cootie herself with 21, and Molly Sullivan had 15. Molly's a senior. We're going to feature Molly in a second here. She's the 1-2 punch this season for Coach Jacoby. And then they defeated Athol 44-17, and Molly Sullivan was the only lady Mountie in double figures. She had 20 points, but she had a great season. So her accolades she's going to share honors for Player of the Week this week. She's just a lot of fun to watch, Molly Sullivan from the Mount Greylock Mounties.
And there she is, Rick, one of the co-players of the week. We'll talk about the other one in a moment. Molly Sullivan, the senior, leaves Greylock on a high note here as our co-player of the week for this week, the senior, number 24 from Mount Greylock, and as you indicated, Rick, a real strong finish.
Yeah, very, very good finish. And sometimes what we like to do here at High School Basketball Weekly is give accolades to kids that are well-deserving, but there's so many of them. It's so hard to choose week to week, Tim, as you know. I think it's key that some of these kids that we give this award to propel their team in wins. It's great to have a great scoring week. If it doesn't turn out with something in the win column, it doesn't mean that much to the program or sometimes even to the student athlete. But in Molly's case, 2 outstanding games, and they have one more game remaining. They'll close out their season, but their future is very, very bright when you have a nucleus coming back.
Hoosick Valley, Rick, continues to roll along. They earned the number 1 seed in the Class D Western Mass Tournament. We'll talk about that in a minute. They finished their season with a nice victory, and then they marched on to the Western Mass Tournament. But they are looking for a Western Mass crown and are also eyeing the state tournament, which will be coming up beginning next week.
Yeah, and so they had to finish up in Lee, Tim, for their regular season. And they handled the Lady Wildcats 66-34. Ashland Ashore with 20 points led the way for the Lady Hurricanes. Taylor Garabedian had 12. A lot of kids got in the scoring column, and that was just a little prerequisite to their Class D quarterfinal in Cheshire at Hoosick Valley. The number 1 seeded Hurricanes knocking off number 8 seeded Ware 58-30. Garabedian led the way with 16, and Abby Scalaba, who we've brought up several times this year, she really became a role player. She had a role at Greylock, Tim, and she has a role at Hoosick Valley. She fits in that program extremely well. I knew that with her playing a full season, it was going to be a lot of fun probably for Coach Frederick's program, getting an outstanding athlete in Abby Scalaba. She may not be the leading scorer all the time, but she has led the way, and her contributions certainly paid dividends off to where they are right now. So the Hurricanes led 27-4 at the end of 1, and they really never looked back. So they move on to the semifinals, and they will remain at home, as they well should be.
Right. Drury, we talked about them last week. They've been on the bubble, trying to qualify both for the Western Mass Tournament, which they have, as well as the state tournament. And boy, they've been in some tight games down the stretch here, Rick, and you've covered some live. And this is a team that continues to pull these close games out.
Yeah, we talked about how the Drury boys and girls, for almost the whole month of January, were on the road. And Coach Downey just couldn't wait to get some home games, and he did pretty well. He started off really well, but then he had a couple of really tough games with tough opponents. Played South Hadley really tough, lost by 5 points at home. Really had a really, really poor shooting night, and they never had it against Springfield ICS that they have battled over the last couple of seasons. But I think the biggest disappointment at that time, and that was about 2 weeks ago, was a tough game that we did here on Northern Berkshire Community Television. It was a 45-44 loss at home to Agawam in a game the Drury led by 6 or 7 points with only a couple minutes to go. They just couldn't hang on. And so it was kind of doom and gloomy at that particular time. But Coach Downey never gave up on his kids. They never gave up on each other. And so they finished the season with a couple of victories. And one of the victories was against Mount Everett, a game that we did in a girls-boys doubleheader. It was 55-30 Blue Devils. And in that ball game, we'll show you a clip here in a second, the game started out with the Eagles, Emma Goey, just controlling the post, just backing Brooke Bishop in and getting a couple of putbacks. But then after that, Drury got going. You got Lauren Davis with a short jumper here. And then you got Maddie Hodeling with a lay-in off the glass as they started coming back, and then they started pulling away a little bit. Russell with a little slash move to the hoop. And then a very unselfish Brooke Bishop just handing the ball off, and Jacinta Felix using the glass and Lauren Davis for a three from the corner. And no matter who you're playing, if you're not guarded, you can knock those down. You're going to be in good shape. And then Brooke Bishop herself comes out of the post here, sets a screen, gets a nice feed from Davis, and she pops a three herself, and she knocks it down. And Drury won that ball game, as I said, 55-30. Davis had 15. Alyssa Russell had 12. And then they moved on, Tim, to Western Mass first round, and they were on the road, and they played a very, very good Franklin Tech team. And, you know, Franklin Tech plays in a league where they only had lost one ball game. I think they were like 11-1 or something like that. And they were ranked very, very high in girls D5, not just in the Pioneer Valley in Western Mass, but also throughout the state of Massachusetts. And Drury found a way, playing a little bit shorthanded with very few kids that could play off the bench. And they found a way to upset Franklin Tech on their home floor, 46-45. Lauren Davis, again, led the way with 12 points, and Jacinta Felix had 10. Balanced scoring all the way down. Brooke Bishop had 8. Alyssa Russell had 7. And in that ball game, it was actually a key jump shot by Eva Moser, the freshman that's getting a lot of playing time now for the Blue Devils. She scored with 20 seconds to go to give Drury the lead, and they never gave it up, and they're going to move on to the next round themselves.
Absolutely, and they continue. They're my choice, believe it or not, Rick. I believe they can get all the way to the finals. I said to Coach Downey, I thought his team was on the right side of the bracket and had a real good shot at getting all the way to the finals of the Class C Western Mass tournament. We'll have to see how that plays itself out. But for her efforts, the outstanding senior from Drury, Lauren Davis, is our co-player of the week this week.
Yeah, Lauren was very deserving of this. We weren't able to give it to her earlier in the season, but she really, really had 2 incredible games. She, in a recent interview, Tim, after the Mount Everett game, she told me she knows she's not a scorer. That's not her job. And I called her the Energizer Bunny. She just wind her up and let her go. And she's an incredible ball handler, assists, rebounds. She does everything. But when you can knock down points like she did in those 2 key wins, if they can keep that up, they have a very good chance against Palmer in the semifinals.
And when we take a look, Rick, as we've said, we're into the Western Mass tournament and also the state tournament. The first 2 games of the Western Mass tournament count for state seedings. Let's take a look just quickly now at the state seedings for the girls in D5. And when you look at it in D5, you see something very interesting here. Hoosick Valley, they actually went down to number 5 even though they won. They slipped from 4 to 5. Then they're followed right there by Palmer, who is playing in the same Western Mass division as Drury. And then you see the rest of the lineup. And I commented on this. Looking at this state tournament is a possibility that Drury and Hoosick Valley could be facing each other at some point in the early rounds of this state tournament. We'll have to wait and see how the final rankings come out, and those final rankings will be out at the end of this week on Friday, the 24th of February. They will put the final rankings out, and we'll see where that matches up. On the Western Mass side there, you see in the Class D, Hoosick Valley there, number 1, playing at Pioneer Valley in the quarters. Lennox and Munson playing in the other quarterfinal. That final will be Saturday, the 25th of February at Holyoke. Right now it's scheduled at Holyoke High School. All the Class C and D boys and girls games will be at Holyoke High School. So on the Class C side, there you see it. Drury Palmer, a very good Springfield ICS in Taconic. I think Drury stands a good shot as well to get to the championship game in another matchup with Springfield ICS. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. We'll see how that goes. We'll have a report on that next week on High School Basketball Weekly. Moving over to the boys' action, Rick. Well, of course, we had the absolute privilege last week to do the live broadcast, both of High School Basketball Weekly and the game, Hoosick Valley and Drury up at Drury. And actually, both games, that game lived up to its billing. We had a blast doing it, and we want to thank our production crew, Peter Gentile, along with Dave Fabiano. We simulcasted it as well on WMNB FM 107.1. And kudos to you, Rick. You did a tremendous job getting all the information together for that and organizing it. Live broadcasts are always a little bit nerve-wracking, but they are a lot of fun to do, and we hope that everybody that couldn't get to the game enjoyed it. But if they got to the game, they got their money's worth out of these two rivals.
Yeah, first of all, as far as high school basketball weekly is concerned, Tim, it was great doing it. We did it from across where we actually broadcast, and Peter Gentile shot us from his camera across the court, and it worked out perfectly. And we had two incredible guests. Mounties boys head coach Bob Thistle and the athletic director of Hoosick Valley and Drury, Jeff Polari, and they were so cordial and gave us a great interview. And of course, it was great to have our friend Coach John Franzoni do the game with us, Tim.
Yeah,
he had so much value as a color guy, former player and a former coach. Adds so much to the broadcast. And it worked out perfect. And we were live at Drury, and then we got right into the game. And the game didn't disappoint.
Oh.
The only thing Coach Reset would tell you at the end was we totally ran out of gas. Other than that, the fans surely got their money's worth.
Well, we're going to get into that a little bit later. First, let's talk about a couple of other teams. First, McCann. McCann, all right, the boys, looking at the boys' action for them, they have qualified for the state tournament, and they also qualified for the Western Mass Tournament. And in their opening game, Rick, they came up on the short end of the stick against a very good number 1 seed, Paulo Freire.
Right. Well, the good news is they got into Western Mass. The bad news, they were an 8 seed, and the 8 seed is going to play the 1 seed in that class. So it ended up being Paulo Freire, and Paulo Freire has been a very, very good basketball team for the last several years. They were the state finalist, losing to Maynard last year. They upset at Wacona High School. They upset Taconic High School to get there. And of course, they most likely got rocked by graduation, Tim. But they still have a very, very good squad. They play mostly Springfield teams, so they play up. So their record may not show it at 8 wins and 9 losses or something very close to that. But they do play very, very big schools. But they're still a Division V. And they were able to handle the McCann Tech Hornets 73-46. Jake Howland, who has led the way all year long for the Hornets, led the way in scoring this game with 13 points. Senior center Colby Marco and sophomore Eric Ruggio each had 10. So when Coach Bullitt gets 3 kids, sometimes 4 kids in double figures, that's most of the time. Most of the time it's a recipe for victory, but it's just a little bit outclassed by much bigger school, and those kids are good basketball players down there in Springfield. So no shame there. But McCann will get ready now. They'll have a state vocational tournament, and as you said, Tim, we'll be looking for their final seeding in D5 to see who they match up against. They will finish the season against Renaissance in a tune-up game to get them ready for all that.
Right, so because they will finish the regular season with a 500 record, despite their ranking, they will get a play-in game in the Western Mass Tournament. We'll talk about that. I'm sorry, in the state tournament. We'll talk about that in just a few moments. Mount Greylock, very interesting. Mounties, they number 3 in the Class C Western Mass Tournament. And they had a very, very tight squad game with Athol, but they came out on the winning end of it.
Right, and during High School Basketball Weekly last week on our live show, Tim, we talked to Coach Thistle about it, and you actually brought it up to us during that broadcast, that if Drury was not able to beat Hoosick Valley and or Hopkins Academy the following night, there may be a switch from Greylock from 4 to 3 and Drury from 3 to 4, and that happened.
Right.
And so Drury ended up with playing their game against Lennox, who they probably didn't want to see again.
Exactly.
And Lennox certainly didn't want to see again. But then again, on the flip side, Coach Thistle ended up playing a team from his league, the Athol Red Raiders.
Right.
Now, the more you play a team, the better you know each other. It's execution, and that's exactly what happened. And so the Mounties played at home and played Athol, and they got by that game, but it was 42-40. and they handled Athol a lot easier in their regular season matchups. So it just goes to show you, sometimes the third time's the charm. They in sports, they say it's tough to beat a team 3 times in the same season, but it depends on what level. If it's professional or collegiate, you can understand it. High school, maybe a little bit different, but they found a way to pull it off. They will move on. Seamus Barnes, the senior big guy with 11, and Chase Doyle, their incredibly talented guard with 10, the only 2 Mounties in double figures. So they got by Athol, and they will now take on Greenfield, a very, very good basketball team, but a team that they can beat.
Right.
As we said before, they battled Drury, they battled Huzik, they battled Paulo Freire. You know they will battle Greenfield, and hopefully they'll come out on top.
Well, talking about Drury, Rick, they had 2 very difficult games back-to-back last week, and just real tough, an emotional game against Huzik Valley, and then they had to follow that up with the next night against a very, very good Hopkins Academy team. And we got clips on both of them in that Huzik Valley Drury game. That was a dandy.
It was a great ball game. It was a lot of fun to cover. That's usually our Super Bowl. You know, we used to have a home and home because of the Berkshire County League breakup and this new Pioneer Valley format. The teams only play once a season. We were in Cheshire last year. That was a 14-point Drury win in a very, very low-scoring defensive game. And this one a little bit different. And it was seesaw back and forth. And then the biggest play of the game was a timeout called by Coach Bill Robinson,
right,
when he said, well, look, I think I've seen enough. We're going to go to zone. And Drury at times struggled with zone. I think sometimes the kids know it. I know Coach Rissette's talked about it before. If you don't have kids that can knock them down from the outside on open shots, you're going to struggle because it's very, very hard to penetrate. But in this ball game, here's Frank Field, an incredible sharpshooting junior with a short jumper. And then Louis Gelati, that's what he does. He's a thrasher and a slasher through the paint.
Outstanding
and he's the best at that. And then Quanell Bradley, incredible 9th grader with a nice feed, laying it in. On the other side, on the little missed shot here, Sammy Mormon with a good box out and a putback off the glass. And then Gelati again, slashing the same exact thing as before. Here's Joey McGovern. If you give him a little bit, he's going to take an NBA 3 and bang, he hits it. Dante Dillard had a nice game for Drury. He saw a lane, put it off the glass, and then Joey McGovern does the same thing. When he doesn't take the outside shot, very quick move and putting it in, the left-hander off the glass. So the great highlights there of the Drury game, but
right,
the fact that Drury was in that ball game right up until about the 5-minute mark of the 4th quarter, and as Coach Rissette said, ran out of gas, primarily unable to penetrate that incredible zone that Coach Robinson employs.
2 observations from my point of view, Rick, in that one. Sammy Mormon had a big game, I thought, for Drury. He really did a great job inside for the Blue Devils, and he did a great job for them. And also, you alluded to it, Quanell Bradley, the freshman, he had a double-double, 12 points and numerous rebounds. I think it was 14 rebounds. So the freshman had a big game and kind of helped out Huzik Valley. But a great game, great atmosphere for both teams. And Drury had to follow it up the next night against a very difficult Hopkins team.
Yeah, when you looked at the schedule, and the Hopkins game was postponed from a game with that cold weather spell that we had come through the Northeast, and so they moved that to the final game. It was supposed to be Drury Huzik for the finale, and the 4 best teams, I really think the strongest teams in D5 boys would be Taconic, Pioneer Valley, Hopkins Academy, and Huzik Valley. And 2 of those teams, Drury had to play back-to-back. Now, yes, they were granted they didn't have to travel over the mountain. They didn't have to get on a bus. They were home. But nevertheless, it's easy to kind of run out of gas. But Hopkins Academy is an extremely, extremely talented team. And we're going to show you some clips here of that ball game. Here's Teddy Sear, the incredible, talented 9th grader, knocking down a 3. And Patrick Fitzgibbons with a 3. Sear's going to come right back. This is all in the first quarter action. Sear uses the glass, puts it up and in, and they got out to a pretty good lead, but Drury started coming back. Jorge Bond from the corner for three.
Oh, talented, very talented eighth grader.
Fitzgibbons, outside shooter. So they go inside, outside, and they can do it either way. And here's Jorge Bond, the eighth grader, again for a second three. So, he's going to be their shooter. Gelati with a little pull up here. And then finally, Dante Dillard. So the Drury kids that could throw the threes, Dillard and Bond kept them in the ballgame as much as they possibly could. And then again, it was almost like doing a carbon copy of the Hoosick Valley game, Tim. Drury was right there till about the 3 or 4 minute mark of the fourth quarter, hit that dry spell, got outscored. If you take a look at the two scores, 58-46 in favor of Hoosick over Drury, and then the Drury game against Hopkins was 61-47. Double-digit losses, but they were single digits and low single digits right up until the 3 or 4 minute mark. And as I said, Coach Reset said we just kind of ran out of gas a little bit. So he said it was as simple as that in an interview with the iBerkshires.
Drury's still in the Western Mass tournament. We'll talk about that in a minute, as well as they're looking forward to the state tournament. They've qualified for that. So their season not done by a long shot. Another team that seems to be rolling here at the end, Hoosick Valley, Rick. They're on a real winning streak. Of course, we talked about that big win over their rival Drury. But they then went on to also beat Bay State Academy. So they're on a roll, and then they opened up with a win in the Western Mass tournament.
Yeah, just to give some accolades to the top scorers in those ball games. In the Drury win, or the win over Drury, I'm sorry, Frank Field and Bradley each had 16. Joey McGovern had 15. So that's pretty darn good balanced scoring there for the Hurricanes. They, as you said, Tim, they knocked off Bay State Academy, a league foe in the regular season game, last regular season game, 74-54. Frank Field again led the way with 24. Joey McGovern had 18. So, that 1-2 Hurricane punch has done it all season long. And then they got into the quarterfinals of Class D Western Mass and took care of Mount Everett, the Eagles at home, 78-46. Again, Field with 20, McGovern 16, Aiden Wicks with 14, and Quinnell Bradley with 12. So they continue on. They will play Hopkins Academy in the semifinals. And you just saw the clips of Hopkins. They're a real deal. It's going to be a whale of a ball game down there in Hadley.
Right. And for his efforts, our high school player of the week this week, Frank Field, and he's had an outstanding finish to his regular season here, Rick.
Yeah, and again, Frank is so deserving of this award. But you know what? When you're a leader of this team, as he and Joey McGovern are, the seasoned veterans, only as juniors, the 16 points versus Drury, 24 Bay State, 20 against Mount Everett, those are all wins. And that makes a big difference when you propel, when you have a great game and you propel your team to victory.
And there, take a look at now where we're at. The boys Class C Western Mass tournament. The top 4 seeds went on, and we talked about it. Greylock and Drury flipped there last week. Greylock went from 4 to 3. Drury dropped down to 4, and they've got a tough matchup with Paulo Freire, and as does Greylock with Greenfield. But that's a great seed in the Western Mass tournament there, the Class C tournament. On the Class D side, you've got Hoosick Valley still in it against, of course, that very good Hopkins. And that's a tough tournament right there. You got number 1 Pioneer. They are also a very good team. So whoever comes out of that one will be well deserved. On the state tournament side, right now you see in the rankings for the boys, Taconic at the top of the list for the state tournament in D5. Hoosick Valley is down at number 13, and of course, they're trying desperately to avoid falling into that 15, 16, 17 bracket. There you see them. But you've got Pioneer Valley Hopkins, who are up there 6-8, and Drury down at 24. Follow, closely there, Greylock and Drury. We'll see how that final ranking comes up, but the state tournament will kick off next week for all these teams at one point or another, and we're going to be there to cover it and report on it next week on High School Basketball Weekly. So for Rick Boa, I'm Tim Morey. Stay tuned next week. We'll have all the action both in the Western Mass tournament and the preliminary rounds of the state tournament right here on High School Basketball Weekly.
Take care, everybody.